Hey everyone, it was round 5 of the candidates tournament today, and Ian Nepomniachtchi was playing Wang Hao. Now both players are on decent form, and you just never know with Nepo, to be honest. He can bring out brilliances or just suffer an amazing loss. So in this game he was playing white, and Wang Hao was playing black. The game kicked off with 1 e4, and we get into a Petrov after e5, knight to f3, knight to f6, and Jan decided to take on e5. Now there are a couple of things black can play here. One of them is knight takes e4 if they wish and regain the pawn straight away, and play can usually continue with queen e2, queen e7, queen takes e4, d6, and then d4, pawn takes knight, recapturing the piece, pawn takes pawn, and then knight c6, trying to recapture this e5 pawn. White can either opt for bishop b5 or knight c3. Knight c3 is more common. Black takes on e5, the queen takes, knight takes, bishop f4, bishop d6, and again we're into quite an equal game. Maybe white has a slight edge though due to more developed pieces, probably going to castle queenside. But yeah, this position is perfectly acceptable for both sides if they wish to play it. But after knight takes e5, Wang Hao played the more main move, d6, attacking the knight, kicking it away. It drops back to f3, and black takes on e4. It is possible for white now to play queen e2, but it doesn't win a piece because then there's queen e7, and if d3, black can simply drop the knight back to f6, and after bishop g5, queen takes queen, bishop takes queen. Again we're into very equal territory. Both sides have got good chances. Maybe again white has a slight edge due to being further along in development. But in the game, Nepo played d4, again the main move, and Wang Hao played d5, supporting the knight on e4 and just blockading the centre. Bishop d3 was played, bishop f5 to support the knight, Nepo castle kingside, bishop e7 developing, then there's rook e1, castles, and knight b to d2. So both sides are just developing, and I put 3 hours here on this knight on e4 because now actually white has 3 pieces attacking this knight on e4, which forces black to make a decision and move it. So cleverly Wang Hao just drops it back to d6 because this knight now covers the f5 bishop. So if bishop takes f5, black can recapture with the knight, and it's equal play again for both sides. White may continue with c3, black can play c6. If queen c2 attacking the knight, black can play g6. And white can go in for knight e5, but then there's knight d7, knight f3 takes, and pawn takes. And I put pawn takes at the end of this variation because white's going to try and mix it up. That's what I'd play anyway, if I was in that sort of position. Because if we play knight takes instead, it's pretty equal for both sides with the same sort of pawn structure. Probably would end in a draw. So going back to the game, after knight d6, instead of taking the bishop, white just played knight to f1, going to reroute the knight some square. Black took the bishop on d3 though, Nepo recaptured, and then black played c6. So black is super solid in this position. There's no problems really, just got to develop the knight out on b8 to a good square. And after bishop to f4, this is what black does. He played knight a6, going to reroute it to c7. So white's just pretty much got all their pieces out, and here it's up to Nepomniachtchi to sort of think of a plan and an idea. And this is what we all should do in our games, and he goes for the AlphaZero approach. He plays the move h4. The plan is either to play knight g5, or maybe just launch the pawn up even further and create an attack. Again, we've seen AlphaZero and Leela Chess Heroes do this on multiple occasions, and the Grandmasters have decided to do the same. Now the point behind this h4 move is that if bishop takes h4, thinking they're going to win a pawn, white can just take it, the queen takes, and bishop takes knight, and white just wins a knight. So after h4, obviously Wang Hao is too smart for that. He just ignores it and plays knight c7. So I'm going to reroute the knight probably to e6, where it can kick this bishop on f4, I imagine. But first, Nepo plays knight g5, so threatening mates with the queen and knight. Black takes this knight off. Nepo recaptures with the bishop. So after bishop g5, Wang Hao played f6, but the point is if queen d7 instead, then rook e7 is just good for white. And after queen c8, white can play moves like queen g3, attacking the knight on d6, threatening bishop h6 ideas. So instead of moving the queen, black just has to play f6 and attack the bishop. So it sort of weakens black's position ever so slightly. So the first major weakness, and then he goes for bishop f4, so reroutes the bishop to a good diagonal. Black played queen d7, going to bring the rook over. Nepo played knight g3. The rook is brought over, and then there's a trade of pieces. Bishop takes knight, queen takes bishop, and then knight to f5, attacking the queen. And this knight now on f5 is a very solid piece. So we're getting rid of the knight on d6, so we can play this knight f5. It's got a great square. And if white can reinforce with g4 perhaps, that knight's going to be a massive pest for black to deal with. And we see after queen d7 that Nepo uses this knight quite well. He plays queen h3, preparing a Qe2. So for instance, if black goes a6, there's knight h6 check, king h8, and then white can just swing down, queen takes queen, win a queen. So after queen h3 sets up this Qe2, forces black to move the king. Another weakening move. So slowly but surely Nepo is ever so slightly increasing his advantage or position. So he's forced this f6 move, and now he's forced the king into the corner. Doesn't seem like a lot at the moment, but we'll actually see later in the game all these little weaknesses help white to win the game. So h5 was played by Nepo. Stopping any g6 ideas, that will kick this knight away. Rook takes rook was played, white recaptured, and then there's rook e8. Another trade of rooks, so both pair of rooks have been traded off. And again, Nepo's got to think of a good move here. I used the computer and it suggested king f1. And after a5, a4, queen f7, queen g4, queen d7, I looked at the lines, and to be honest, the computer really struggles to come up with a good plan for white here. So it's not very easy. Actually, in this position, Stockfish 10 gave white as plus 0.9. So it thinks white is winning, but having a look at the variations, they're just an absolute mess. It does that computer thing where both sides just move their pieces like ever so slightly and just back and forth. It's not very helpful for me to add those variations in. It's just an absolute pigsty. So I think after this knight takes e8, Nepo played a good move actually. He played g4. So he supports his knights on f5, just locks down the position, and it forces black now to ask what are they doing. And I don't think Wang Hao really knows. He just plays a6, so makes a pawn move. Nepo does the same with b3. Queen e6, so okay, black's bringing the queen onto e1 perhaps, a good move. But white just shuts this down with knight e3. Okay, so the knight on f5 has done its job. It comes back to help to defend for a second. And now maybe white can even prepare to trade some pawns with c4. Now I was thinking maybe black could play queen e4, but then comes queen g3, and I'm not sure on black's position because maybe the queen is infiltrating this b8 square. And if king g8, there's queen b8. Attacking b7, so queen e7 to defend it, but then queen g2, queen d7 and c4, and we're getting to a position actually that's quite similar to the game. Not as good as the game, but quite similar, with similar themes. So knight d6 was played by black. Obviously they're focusing on the centralisation of the knight and limiting white's attacking potential. Nepo plays another good move, h6, so it attacks this g7 pawn. I don't think black's ever going to take this because this looks absolutely terrible to have doubled h-pawns, and I'm sure the queen will just take it anyway. So his forces g6, so Nepo forces another weakness in the position. And now I've titled my video Nepo plays an explosive c4, and now he plays it, c4, absolutely explosive. And I've put a load of arrows on this position. We'll just have to go through it. So after d takes c4, why is it so explosive? Well, after b takes c4, you expect black now to recapture it with the knight, knight takes c4, but this just loses on the spot. I wonder if you can see why. So white should now play knight takes c4, and after queen takes c4 we see why white wins. Just queen h2, a very simple move. Threatening mate on b8, and there's actually nothing black can do to prevent it. Queen g8 is one option, but then white can just play queen d6, attacking f6. And there's no way for this queen to defend it. They can't go to f8 or d8 to defend this pawn. And the only way to defend the pawn is actually queen f7. But then just comes queen d8. And after queen g8 again, there's queen takes f6, queen g7, and queen takes g7 is checkmate. And in this position, it's just amazing that black loses the game. You just wouldn't expect it. So again, if queen h2, what other moves could black play? Well, they could go king g8, potentially. Then comes queen b8 check. And if king f7, this queen takes b7. And if king e6, moving the king up, then just queen takes h7. And if queen c1, to try and get a few checks in, there's queen g2. And if queen g5, just queen g8 check, king d7, another check. move the king up, and black's run out of moves to play. They can play f5 of course, but then just comes f3, and if they take twice, queen e3, eventually white can just play king h4, and if black carries on checking, just move the king up and we'll take this g6 pawn next move. And there's nothing black can do to stop white's promotion of this h pawn. Eventually the checks will run out. So again, after queen h2, again if king g8 and check, and king f7, queen takes b7, if black goes back to king e8, again white can just play queen takes h7, and if black tries to check, king g2 again, queen g5, and just go king g3, f5, f3, similar to the variation we just saw with f takes g4. Now it's important here white checks though, otherwise there may be a perpetual. So king e7, queen g7, king d8, and then f takes g4. As we saw after queen e3, just king h4 again. And white's going to win this g6 pawn. So what other moves could black play? Well, the only other one I looked at was queen c1 with check. But again, just king g2. And if king g8, we get the same variation with queen b8 check, king f7, and queen takes b7. So if we just go back to this position in the game, c4 is an amazing move. It must have took him a long time to see this queen h2 ideas. We have the benefit of computers or our own after analysis, but it's just amazing to see that at the end of it there's this idea of queen h2 and queen to b8. Otherwise black just wins a pawn. So after c4, Wang Hao did take, and then b takes c4, but he didn't play knight takes c4, so Wang Hao obviously saw this queen h2 idea and played king to g8. So Nepo plays queen h2 anyway, so still the threat's there if knight takes c4. So king f7 was played, and now the threat is alive. Knight takes c4, queen takes c4 wins a pawn for black. And interestingly here my computer wanted to play queen to g3 because it sets up another trap. If knight takes c4 now, then there's queen c7 check, and if queen e7, obviously we take the queen and take the knight, wins a piece. So after queen c7 check, if the king moves backwards, then there's queen b8 check, king goes back, queen takes b7, king d6, and then just queen b4 at the end of it, king d7, and just queen takes c4, wins another piece. So queen g3 would have been a great move, and luckily though black has the idea of just playing a normal move like b5, so then, again they don't have to take this c4 pawn off the board. So after king f7, instead of playing queen g3, Nepo just played c5, attacking the knight on d6, which jumps into b5. So now it is attacking this d4 pawn. But white now plays queen b8, so attacks b7. And here, maybe you should pause the video and see what you would play here. Would you protect the b7 pawn, or would you go in for knight takes d4? Let me know what you'd play. If you said knight takes d4, this is actually the better move because it leads to a drawn game. After queen takes b7, king e7, queen takes a6, and black can play queen e4 and has knight e2, knight f3 ideas. The point is after queen a7, let's say the king goes to e8. White can keep checking, of course, but if white ever stops wanting to check and plays queen takes h7, black has perpetuals with knight e2, queen h2, queen f4, king g2, queen e4, king f1, and then they should play knight to g3 with check, and if f takes g3, there's queen f3, king g1, takes the knight, and black's got their perpetual check that they so desperately wanted, and it's a drawn game. So in this position there's no question that black is actually worse, so knight takes d4 would have saved black's position. But in the game, Wang Hao now just played queen d7 to protect their b7 pawn, and this is a really big mistake, because white can now win the game with queen h8, so attacking this h7 pawn, and in the game after e6 to protect the pawn, Nepomniachtchi now came up with a brilliant move, f4. Threatening to play f5, and g takes f5 is checkmate. So how can black stop this? If they play f5 themselves, then I think this moves like queen e5 would just be very nice for white. And equally, if just queen takes d4 here, moves like queen e8 are just checkmate for white. So in the game, Wang Hao continued with knight takes d4, which stops this f5 idea. But white played queen g8 check. If the king goes back to e7, there's queen takes h7 with check, king d8, queen takes queen, king takes, and white's just going to push this pawn and get another queen. So after queen g8 check, Wang Hao played queen f7 to block. Nepo played queen c8 check, queen d7 again to block, queen g8 check, queen f7 to block, If you played check again, it would have been perpetual. So he played queen d8, attacking this knight. Queen d7 though to block, but now comes a good move. f5 check, pawn takes with check, and the point is now if the king moves away to e5, then queen takes queen will be played. So black's forced to take this pawn with knight takes f5, and Nepo just wins a piece. Queen takes queen with check. The king recaptures, which leaves the knight on f5 vulnerable. Knight takes f5. And after king e6, knight to e3, Wang Hao actually resigned the game here, and Nepomniachtchi won a brilliant game. So why resign here? I've just gone through some variations because I wasn't so sure. But yeah, white just easily wins this endgame. For instance, if king e5, then we can just play king f2 as white. And if king f4, play knight c4. And if the king goes to e4, there's knight d6 check. King d5, knight takes b7, then that's just too strong. Equally, if king e5, then we just go king f2 again. King d4 this time, but again, white just wins with knight g4. King takes c5, and knight takes f6. I'm going to take this h7 pawn and use this passed h pawn to get a queen. I looked at f5 as well, but it's still lost after king f2, king f6, let's say king f3. And if black goes after this pawn, knight takes f5 is still a winning after king g6, knight d6. And if h5, this knight takes b7. The king for white is just going to catch the pawn, and this knight will be too fast, just going to take off these pawns eventually and get a passer. So that was tough on Wang Hao. Basically the only mistake he made was here with queen d7. Again, like I say, knight takes d4 would have been a draw here if he found the perpetual check ideas. But it's very hard to see, and I'm using the computer to help me with my analysis. But anyway, I thought Nepo played a brilliant game, and my favourite move of the game was this c4 idea. I just think this is really brilliant. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments section below, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe and click the notification button to see when I post more videos. Hopefully I'll post another video tomorrow with the candidates round 6, so I'll see you then, and have a good one and a safe one. See you later.
Thank you.